My name's Courtney, and you might have seen me in a few of the webinars and videos or in the Facebook posts as well. So if you could just maybe do a thumbs up or something just to acknowledge you can see and hear clearly, and we will get going. And the reason why I want to do this, look, we don't normally do live webinars, but it's good to experiment. We find these are really topical issues. What's happening in the newspaper right now is amazingly accurate for Module 1 and Module 2. So when you read Module 1 and 2, you might say, oh, it's a bit dry, it's a bit boring, it's hard for me to pick up the study guide. But really, this is real life in business. This is what people go to work and talk about right now in the accounting profession, because it's horrendous what's taken place. So I don't want to spend very long today. I want to talk through what's happened in real life, how it links to this material, so that as you read the study guide, you're like, yes, this is real stuff. Now, I often get messages from people studying the CPA program, and they say, hey, in my workplace, this is what's happening. And there's proper fraud, there's proper dishonesty, there's misreporting. And they're like, do I blow the whistle? Do I leave? What do I do? So these are genuine ethical dilemmas that many, many people face. So I want to encourage you as you read this to go, how does this happen in real life? And what am I going to do about it? Because people are going to push you to be unethical, to do the wrong thing, and you've got to make a choice about where you're at. So let's start with the framework. If you open APS 110, our code of ethics, which tells us how we're supposed to behave, it tells us that the accountants have to act in the best interest of society, in the public interest. Now, that's amazing. If you're a lawyer, you have to work for your client. But we know that if all accountants just worked for their clients instead of for the public interest, huge problems would arise because no one could trust any of the financial statements that were ever published. And so as people are investing millions and billions of dollars, think about your superannuation, your retirement fund, all of those assets. If they are not dealt with properly, then we're going to lose money. Our economies aren't going to work. People aren't going to trust other people, and it's going to be terrible. So a foundation point is that accountants must act in the public interest. Now, if you've read anything in relation to what happened in PwC, public interest was the furthest thing from their minds. It was all about making money. Now, don't forget, these senior partners are already making millions of dollars, and they helped big corporates like Google and Amazon avoid hundreds of millions of dollars of tax. You got to ask yourself, how is that helpful? Now, those millions of dollars in tax, instead of paying for roads, hospitals, teachers, and all the other public services that we provide in Australia, got given to shareholders, owners, probably who live overseas. So anyone who thinks that they want to be part of that system, I just think that's incredibly disappointing. So Module 1, Part A, it says accountants are professionals. What is a profession? And so what is a profession? It's really hard to exactly say that. Oh, I'm professional. Okay, what does that mean? Do you dress smart? Do you know a lot of things? Do you just look really good when you go to meetings with a suit on? Well, according to Module 1, Part A, it says there are 8 key attributes that when you combine them together, we end up with a profession. Now, what's going on with the accountants? If we're supposed to be a profession, what happens, for example, when it comes to obeying the code of ethics? Massive breach. What about ethos and culture? What is our governing body doing? And are we able to regulate ourselves? So one of the interesting things you'll see in Module 1 is we used to have autonomy. We used to make our own rules, and the government trusted us to do that. But we have lost so much credibility. The government has become more and more involved. And it's going to do so again because, once again, we've proven we can't be trusted. So instead of pure autonomy, the profession and the government work together. So we have a co-regulation model. Now, ethos and culture is another attribute of the profession. I'm hoping you've already read Module 1 and you've considered these things. So there are the symbols of what a profession stands for. And normally we talk about things like a used car salesman. What do people visualize when there's a used car salesman? What do people visualize when they think of a lawyer or a judge? What do you think about when you see someone in IT? Are they just going to wear the pocket protector and have a calculator there? What do we think about when someone's working in a trade or working in ministry? And we hold a certain level. Now, hopefully, when you see someone with a clerical collar or they work in ministry in a church or that kind of role, there used to be a lot of trust in those. Now, some of those people have been very untrustworthy and they've had that trust destroyed and devalued. Now, you hope that that's not all the way through. There are many, many people doing very many good things. And the same with lawyers, the same with judges. There might be a few dodgy, corrupt ones, but overall you can trust the law, you can trust the system to help you out. Now, my question to you is, what is the picture that people have in their heads of an accountant? Feel free to put it in the chat. What do people think about accountants? They think of us as safe, boring, objective. Are we more like a referee on a sporting ground, watching and applying the rules, or are we participating in the game? What do people think? Yeah, trustworthy. Yeah, we do tax returns. Yep, so we know the tax law. So technically skillful, that's something people often think of. Someone you can rely on. A lot of people, yeah, this idea of compliance, definitely good at numbers, knowledgeable, sensible, thoughtful, careful, good stewards, trustworthy. You know, if you've got a lot of money, it needs to be looked after, you would hope you could give it to your accountant. So can you keep this safe? Someone you go to for advice, someone who cares about you. Now, one of the rules, for example, that we have is when we give someone advice, we should do it in their best interest. We shouldn't be corruptly telling them to invest in something that makes you rich at their expense, but some people do that. So unbiased, acting with integrity, these are key things that we want. Sadly, when the PwC are in the news and people just see, oh, accountants go to meetings and they hear this information, secret information from the government, and then they go and cheat and they use that to make more money. You just think, what kind of vultures are these people? What kind of dishonest people? Why would you invite them to another meeting ever again? And so that's the problem with our ethos and culture if we don't get it right. The foundation stone of CPA, if you look in the logo, is integrity. We're upright, pure, honest, straightforward, and these are good things to be. People meet us and they can trust us from the start. How wonderful is that? I have my little CPA badge. It's my 20-year membership badge. I'm up to about 24, 25 years. And it says to people, I am a committed part of society. You can be trusted. And I want that to continue. So one of the things that Module 1 talks about is, are we really a profession? Or are we more about just creating a monopoly for ourselves? You can see the monopoly images, the market control viewpoint. Are we just self-interested, greedy people? Well, what PwC just recently showed us is they were all about making money and winning clients and not about working in the public interest. Sadly, this is not the first issue that's ever hit the papers. So here's an example from a few years ago, and this is a major issue that hit the United Kingdom. An organisation collapsed, 11,000 job losses, and yet the auditors had given them a great big tick. So some people are coming out and saying, we don't need the big four as corporates, we need them as government-owned entities so that they can do trustworthy audits. And that's one potential solution. So that's Module 1, Part A. What is a profession? Now, the second part of Module 1, Part B is what's happened and harmed our credibility. So 4 things have hurt our credibility. And related to this issue right now is more about the lack of independence from the client that's taken place. And it's not even an audit issue, but the PwC issue also affects audit significantly. So these are the 2 key ones that are coming together. We are supposed to trust the big 4 and they can't be trusted. So one thing with audit quality is when we don't identify a company in distress, but it's a problem. And what's happening is, even though this wasn't an audit situation, people are conflicted. They are not acting in the public interest. This person went to a meeting and they got given secret government information and used it for their own self-interest. They used it to promote their firm and win more clients. They are so dependent on these companies, they lose their objectivity. And that makes even more sense when you read Module 2, Code of Ethics, and we talk about integrity and objectivity, public interest, key themes. And this is harming our credibility. Now, the image there, I love to use ridiculous images in my webinars. I hope you enjoy them. And the point of showing you these things is, I want you to look at that image. I want you to think about it and go, what's going on here? And the way I visualize it is the auditor or the accountant in the big 4 is that little mouse. And instead of being bold and courageous and strong, we're like a little mouse scared of the big cat, the corporate who decides our future, who gives us cash and makes us happy. We're terrified of them and we scurry around. And that is incredibly disappointing. If that is our culture and our ethos, I'm going to go to a meeting and I'm going to go and try and please my masters by giving them secret tax information. That's appalling. I don't want to be seen as a mouse scurrying around. So hope that image sticks with you. So the final part of Module 1 Part B is how do we restore credibility? How do we fix this embarrassment and make sure we are seen as professionals? Well, 6 key areas happened. The FRC was established. The accounting standards, see, we used to have autonomy. So we had our own standards, and now they are enforced by law because accountants weren't following them. They were cheating. So this next one we have, auditors and Big Four people have to follow the code of ethics, which is a bit scary that we have to make someone follow the code of ethics. There's something wrong if you have to do that. We've got this idea of independence, and then there's more and more regulation. So some key components here. Government is now more heavily involved in regulation. Non-compliance can now have legal penalties, so we can punish you into good behaviour. And then we have a whole bunch of other factors, but the key thing here is a reduction in autonomy because we can't always be trusted. So this brings us into Module 2. So I'm going to pause there for a moment and say, have you read Module 1? Did you understand that Module 1 Part A is about what does it mean to be a professional? Part B is like what harmed us and reduced our credibility so we didn't look like professionals, with a final conclusion of what we can do to fix it. So that's the key theme of Module 1. Does that click for you? Does that make sense? Just a thumbs up, yes, totally get it, totally agree, totally disagree. The people I work with are fantastic. The people I work with are totally corrupted. All right. I hope that helps. And you'll see, even the IT guy reads Module 1. Thanks, Matt. Got Matt in the background helping me out in case anything goes wrong technically. So I just covered Module 1 in 12 minutes. And this is what we try and do with guided learning. So if you're new to the CPA program, you can just read the study guide. People say, should I watch the videos first or last? And we say, watch them first. Because in 12 minutes, I can give you a picture of Module 1. Now, when you go in and read it, you'll say, oh, yeah, of course. And we give you these little images. So an example will be this. So in the study guide, it talks about the 8 attributes of the profession, but we try and give specific practical examples, lots of pictures, lots of stories, lots of case studies to help you remember. And then we give you examples of the 4 factors reducing credibility. Then we give you examples of the 6 factors improving credibility. So we're kind of writing a summary for you if you work through the notes. The imagery and the stories help us remember better because humans are good with stories, we're good with visuals, so we don't just use text. So my recommendation, log into guided learning. You watch the video, do a little mini quiz if you need to, read a little bit of the study guide, watch another video, read the study guide. So it should be this interplay all the time so that you understand. And then do the module quizzes all the way through. And then we have different levels of quizzes, mini quizzes, very, very easy. Module quizzes, medium. Mid-semester test, hard. It's actually very hard. The average is about 9 out of 15 and the average person passes. So if you get 9 out of 15, don't cry that you got 6 wrong. It means you're doing well. And then our final practice exams, which are the full length. They've got the written component, the multiple choice component, and the average mark on that is about 41 out of 63 for the multiple choice, so about 2/3 right. And most people, the average person gets through. So that's what we're going to do. So yes, we'll upload this. It feels a bit different between understanding the textbook and passing the exam. Sometimes people say that. My experience is people read the textbook and they know it a little bit, but they don't really know it. So then they get questions and they go, oh, 2 options were so close you couldn't choose. But I did the CPA program and I learned this subject. I learned it really well. And I can tell you always the right answer, not because I'm amazing, but because I did the reading and I thought about it and I wrestled with it. So it's always clear because every question is designed to be very specific. I've seen people answer a legal question using the code of ethics because they didn't know the study guide well enough. I've seen people use cartel conduct when they should be using misleading and deceptive conduct. That's module 4 because they don't know the law. I've seen people write 2-sentence answers instead of 2 paragraphs because they haven't had enough time. But if you know this study guide and you know these concepts, then you will plow through this exam and you will perform really, really well. But a large portion of people fail. One, they don't read the study guide to the end. Two, they read it, they kind of understand it, but it's open book exam, so they can ask you anything across the whole realm. You can't just know that something's ethical or unethical. You have to know the 5 principles. You have to know the 5 key threats. You have to know the section references. You have to know this inside out. So now we're up to module 2, and I'm jumping into part C, the code of ethics, because that's what I'm linking. I'm just showing you this PwC hugely linked to module 1. What does it mean to be professional, and what are the factors hurting credibility? Now the code of ethics, because auditors and accountants are supposed to comply with this. Now people always say, do I print it out? Well, you don't need to, but you should download it, read through it as you do your studies. But every key word from the code of ethics that you need is already reproduced in the study guide. I'll just quickly answer the question here. Answers in the textbook where the question clearly asks, what should X do? And the answer doesn't deliver a verdict. That's exactly true. You'll see that in one of my webinars. We ask, what should Alex do? Or what should so-and-so do? And accountants in the professional bodies are terrified of telling people to do the right thing. They're actually really, really scared, and it's incredibly disappointing. In your exam, absolutely, you must say this person should do X or this person should do Y. Check out the Module 2 webinars, especially Alex. What should Alex do in relation to the expense claims? And I even talk through that. GN40 is an example. It goes through all these ethical issues and doesn't tell you what to do. It's appalling. But that's because accountants are too scared, that the governing bodies are too scared to hold their members accountable because they might leave the profession and not pay their membership fees. So there's 4 parts to the code of ethics. 1, the fundamental principles, and then a key discussion for what is it like for members who work inside a business as the accountant, which is different to members in public practice who do things like auditing services. And then there are how to be independent. So what we have here, we've got the PwC situation. A person is invited to help the government create legislation to stop tax leakage, to stop these global companies, these Googles and everything else, transferring money out of the country and not paying tax. So they are there to act in the public interest. That's the foundation. And then there are 5 key components. 1, act with integrity. So this means upright, honest, pure, unbiased. Objectivity, totally independent and unbiased. You can be trusted with your judgment. Imagine sitting in a courtroom and their son or daughter walks in, and the judge still has to find them guilty or not guilty, regardless that they are related. That's the image I want in your mind when we talk about being objective. Professional competence and due care. Now, someone in the chat earlier, when I said, what is it, when you think of an accountant, what do you think of? Someone good with numbers, someone who can do your tax return, someone you can ask advice for. Yes, because we are professionally competent. So when I see people doing the CPA program and they're like, oh, how do I get through this quickly? I couldn't be bothered learning it. I kind of want you to leave the profession. I want people who actually know how to do financial reporting and management accounting and all the other components, not just get a 51% pass. I want people to be professionally competent, because then when you use an accountant, they do a good job and they make me and the rest of the profession look good. But the other part of doing a good job is paying enough attention. You might be very clever, but very distracted and not have enough time. So you need to be technically good and take enough care. We have to act with professional behavior, so we cannot be sneaky or dishonest or manipulative. And guess what? It's so simple. We have to maintain confidentiality, and that is the absolute most enormous breach. So in your exam, you will be asked about these principles. Now, they might say, which is the most relevant principle that's been affected? So in PwC's case, there is a lack of integrity, a lack of objectivity. There is, they knew what they were doing, so that's probably okay. But there was definitely unprofessional behavior. So 1, 2, 3 fundamental principles breach, but the most relevant one was absolutely confidentiality. So you don't just have to know the 5 principles, you have to know which is the most relevant to a particular situation. The other thing you need to know is, what are the threats that have caused this harm? Why would someone breach those principles? They look pretty nice. Acting with integrity is pretty obvious. Maintaining confidentiality, once again, very obvious. So what happens is we are threatened, and we have to know which threats apply. Now, most people understand self-interest. In this case, the person was self-interested. Hey, I work for PwC. I know some secret tax knowledge. I can help my clients cheat on tax now because I helped with writing the law. I can make myself more money and make people love me a whole lot more. So this self-interest thread totally destroyed our confidentiality, our integrity, and our objectivity. Did any other threats apply? And in this case, self-review, you weren't really checking your own work. Familiarity, not really. Maybe if you really loved the people you work with, there was no real intimidation taking place. The one thread I find most people don't understand is advocacy. So if you could use the checkbox, and I'm going to say, do you understand advocacy? Just write yes or no. Some no's, some yeses. This is the one people I see are most confused with. All right, thank you for your honesty. I think that's really important. Now, in an exam, you will be tested on advocacy. Why? Because it's the hardest of the 5 threats, so you have to know it. So if you walk out of an exam and say it was too tricky, I would argue you just didn't spend enough time learning. So the number one area people make a mistake is self-review and intimidation. Not self-review, self-interest. When someone does something, they normally do it to make themselves look good, to protect their job, to make things happen. That's self-interest. Now, there might also be intimidation, but read the case facts carefully to look for abuse or harassment rather than just guessing intimidation. Self-review is when you check your own work. It's really hard to check your own work, but it also means if you're in an auditing firm, checking the work within the firm, because the firm is the entity checking its own work. So if auditor number 1 works in a firm, but is checking auditor number 2's work, there is a risk. 1, because you might not look carefully enough. 2, what if I find a mistake? And then if I find a mistake, I have to do something about it. And I don't want to do something about it because my self-interest will be harmed. And then my boss might yell at me. So self-review can turn into self-interest, can turn into intimidation. So they interrelate. And sometimes people get confused with familiarity and self-review. So auditors, when they go and work for a business, businesses who go and work for an auditor. So we have a detailed FAQ on that. Please read the FAQ, download the PDF. It's funny, question 2.10 is the most asked about question in the whole of ethics and governance. So we wrote a whole page FAQ. Is this self-interest or is it familiarity? It could be both. Many, many situations, it's more than one, but one is the most relevant. So advocacy, this is the trickiest one. What it means is advocating for someone. So in the Netherlands, for example, if you're a lawyer, you are called an advocate. You represent that person. You push their case. You sell for them. You represent them. Now you might think being an advocate sounds good. Well, as a lawyer, absolutely. If you advocate for someone, you look after them. Now, if we have someone who is, let's say, disabled and they can't read and they've been penalised by the government, and we go and represent them and help them get through that because of their disability, we've helped them. But advocacy can get too strong. We can be captured by the client. If we start advocating so much, we can lose our objectivity. Remember, we're supposed to be unbiased. We are like a referee at a football match. We're not following either team. We just apply the rules fairly. But if we fall in love with one of the teams, we start advocating for them too much. We will start breaking the rules. So that's what advocacy is. Advocacy is when we promote someone so strongly, we stop being independent. We stop being objective. We stop being unbiased because we are so trying too hard to push their case. So advocacy versus familiarity. They talk to each other like this. If you know someone, like if you're married to someone, you're familiar, right? And that's a big risk because you know them, you're going to want to look after them. So if you're familiar with someone, you might start pushing their case. So that's when you start advocating too hard. So familiarity can lead to too much desire to advocate. If you've known someone for 10 or 20 years, you become familiar with them. You know them, you know their children and their family, and you like them and you have a good time together. So, but that's what familiar is literally the word family. So anytime you have like a family type relationship where you've got to know someone so well, it's very hard to be objective. It's very hard to be unbiased. You want to look after them. You want to help them get off. You think they could never have done that, and you represent them too strongly. So those are the threats we cover in Module 2. So we have principles. The principles are threatened, but we need to have some protections in place. So what are our protections? Well, in this case, if you're at PwC, one of the things we would hope is good corporate oversight. Except there wasn't, because the people at the top were just as corrupt as the people below. Now, these are harsh words, but the CEO in Australia of PwC, a whole bunch of partners, they knew about it, they encouraged it. They encouraged a culture of do what it takes to win some jobs. They did not encourage a culture of ethics and public interest. They couldn't have. This couldn't have happened otherwise. And competent staff and leadership. That's what's really disappointing. It wasn't just one person being naughty. It was a whole culture of an organisation. Now, what happens if you go to PwC and you are ethical? How are you going to make it to the top of the tree? Everyone else in the room is trying to cheat and you're trying to do the right thing. You're going to get pushed out and ostracised pretty quickly. So in the recorded webinar, you'll see, here's an example of PwC being sued. This is in the United States, $5.5 billion. And they said it's not our fault, we've been duped. It's all a bit unfair. But an independent review came out and said it's the worst audit ever seen. So what is going on in these types of situations? Why does it keep on happening? It's just incredibly disappointing. There's some key structural problems. And here's a good example. After a senior manager who worked on the audits was hired by Colonial later on. So you can see this interrelationship, this intertwining, these mega threats that stop people being ethical. So I asked you to read this article and hopefully you're across the PwC issues. But the key point here is, how can we ever trust PwC to be a Big Four auditor in the future, or any type of consultant, when they don't meet the professional requirements? They can't be trusted. That's the number one thing. Why would you ever work with them again? And so here we have a 148-page report came out, leaking confidential government tax plans. But this is the interesting thing, the cultural problems. What we have is an issue of ethos, an issue of ethics, an issue of integrity, and what is our focus? If we're just a profit-making business, then stop pretending that you're an independent professional accountant. That's the biggest problem. And so next, and someone's written, they have to work harder to win the public trust now. Absolutely. And my personal opinion, PwC shouldn't, they just have to stop as a Big Four auditor in Australia now. They have, this happened, I'm old enough to be around when Anderson collapsed 20 years ago, and it's the same thing. Anderson were known for pushing way too ethical boundaries. PwC has a culture, not just one bad person, all the way to the top. They have built an organisation that shows that not only when they got caught, they didn't apologise, they tried to cover it up, they tried to hide it, they tried to suppress it, they tried to say it was nothing. This is the CEO. Oh, it's not a scandal, it's a perception issue. No other involved. That's absolute garbage. Absolute garbage. Oh, and the partners directly involved with the leak left the firm. Absolute garbage. Sorry, that is so frustrating. I would love to see these people, they shouldn't be auditing. Now, there's individuals who work at PwC who can go to another organisation, and in an ethical culture, they'll do just fine and they'll want to be ethical and do the right thing. But why would anyone ever hire this organisation again to do something trustworthy and important, like sign off on an audit? So imagine you pay the auditors, you pay them $300,000, and then someone reads it and goes, oh, this got signed off by PwC. You probably just flip them an extra $50,000 to get them to sign it, right? What's the point? Why would you pay for their stamp of approval when their stamp of approval has no value. So that's my rant on them. And why? Because I'm incredibly disappointed after I'm up to nearly 25 years in the profession. They destroy the profession. They destroy the integrity of the profession, and they have no real intention of changing. So rant over. I hope you can see that Module 1, Module 2 tie together really nicely. When you're given specific examples, you can work through them. Like, imagine you got a question that said, what are the most relevant safeguards that failed? If you got a question, what is the key threat in this situation? If you got a question, what is the most relevant fundamental principle? If you got a question that said, what is the biggest factor reducing credibility? You can start tying these threads together. But if you walk into an exam and you don't know what the 4 factors are that have reduced credibility, now it's an open book exam. You can have your summary notes, but you're not going to have much time. If you don't know those 4 factors and then 6 factors that restore it, and you don't know what's next in Module 1, Part B, technical skills, soft skills. If you don't know utilitarianism, ethical egoism, the philosophical model, the AAA model, if you don't know how to apply those, you're going to hit this exam and go, oh my goodness, I'm a bit stuck. So I hope as you work through the guided learning materials, it really helps you keep on track, helps you understand the material, and keep doing the quizzes. The quizzes prepare you for the exam. The 2 practice exams we have, they take you 3.25 hours each, and then another 3 hours to read the answers. You do that, and your success rate is going to dramatically improve. So I'm done with my presentation. Hope you found it useful to do a live session. Happy to take some questions for the next 5 or 10 minutes. Otherwise, have a wonderful weekend. Keep on studying. Last thing, people say, where should I be up to? And the answer is we have no idea. Normally a semester goes for 10 weeks. And right now would be the end of week 1. Normally the week would start on the 24th of July. But CPA have given you a 12-week semester because the systems were down for a week. So where should you be at the end of week 3? I hope you finish Module 2. I hope you finish Module 3 because so many people we know run out of time and get incredibly stressed. But in a normal 10-week semester, you would be at the end of Module 1 by now. So don't panic if you're not up to that, but keep ahead. I'm amazed at how many times people tell me they have no time. And yet if you look on your phones, you've done 20 hours on your phone this week, YouTube, Snap, all of those other things. So don't tell me you don't have time if you're using them. I know some people have families and work and they don't have time, but get ahead, do the reading, don't wait. You'll be amazed at how much reading there is and how little time you'll have towards the end if you're not careful. So let me start answering some of these questions. Module 3. Module 3 is hard to study. It's director's duties, it's law, it's government, it's tiring, but it's how we structure the business world to make sure it doesn't keel over. So keep reading the financial news. Every day I get emails from ASIC that tell me who has been suspended or shut down or failed, and all of it relates to Module 3 and Module 4. So read the business news and apply it to Module 3 and 4, directors' duties, corporate governance, and laws about competitive conduct. And hopefully that will help. Thank you. I think we may as well do one on Module 3, but don't forget there's the Module 3 webinar recordings. You don't get the chance to ask questions, but it's still good. How to prepare for detailed answer questions. Good question. Go into the webinars. We give you a task. For example, have you seen the task about, should I steal the drugs to save my child's life? Or there's a task about Alex. What should Alex do about the expense claims? Module 3, we have a task called Fashion Center. If you see those tasks, I actually use the webinar as a way of this is how you would answer an exam question, a written response extended answer. Then in Module 4, we go through the IRAC method for answering law questions. Issue, relevant law, apply, conclude. So we give you, there's a detailed video clip on insider trading, for example. There's one on cartel conduct. There's one on corporate governance rules. All of those detailed tasks with detailed solutions where I talk through the answer. Yeah, so if you like this, we can probably do webinars, I don't know, once a week, once a fortnight, see how we go. Yeah, we'll inform you a few days before. This one is only because we decided to give it a try. So this was a quick test, but look, we nearly got 100 people attending and we only gave people 45 minutes notice. So I think we weren't sure if people wanted to come or not, but it looks like it's a popular thing. So welcome, and yeah, let's do it again. We publish this in Facebook, but we email we just emailed everyone and put a Facebook link up. Specific channel for the business news. I just use news.com.au because it's free, but Financial Times, I subscribe to The Economist. There's always heaps of useful articles there. It takes about 3 hours a week to read The Economist. And just follow and follow the government regulators. So ASIC, for example, is a really good regulator, and ACCC in Australia. They send out press releases of who they've convicted or fined or punished. And every time you read that, it makes sense. It goes straight back to the study guide. Cool. I think I've captured on module 2 why the virtue ethics is more applicable for the accounting profession. This is a good question. So virtue ethics, this idea of who you are, what is your character, rather than what you do. So not just consequences based. So virtue ethics is, I like the idea of your character is you are upright, you are truthful, you're honest. It's anyone can pretend to be ethical or follow the rules. But that's not the same as who you really are when no one's watching. So I think that's why I like with virtue ethics. That's what it's trying to say. Your character shines through. You can't maintain a facade pretending to be good for a 35-year career. You either are good or you are not. So look, with the CPD hours, if you do a CPA subject, it's worth 120 hours if you pass. If you fail, it's worth 20. So you don't have to do any other CPD while you're studying the CPA because you already hit your CPD hours with the 120 from doing a subject. How do you evaluate when you have to answer a question in a detailed version or just a short answer? Look, when we do long answer questions, they're really maximum 1 to 2 paragraphs. That's all you need. Issue, law, conclude, or ethical issue, factors involved, people. So in reality, all of them are pretty short. And you can tell by the marks allocated. If it's got 10 marks, it's going to be a big answer. And if it's got 3 marks, keep it short and sweet. The Facebook group, you would see it. Every email we send out from Guided Learning has the Facebook group at the bottom. So use that to join. Thank you, Casey. That's good for my ego. The Economist is good. Thanks, Matt. The Economist is phenomenal. It fills my head with deep, deep knowledge. Financial Review is good, but they often have a paywall, but they do some great stuff. Do you think related PwC staff has similar penalties for breaching confidentiality? Yeah, there's no penalties. They resign, they walk off into the sunset. No one really knows their names. Probably secretly, everyone's like, well done, we like you because you're showing how to make extra money and be a bit sneaky. I don't know. There are virtually no penalties. So, yeah, I think doing the live webinar, because you can go online and watch a webinar anytime, there's never a good time. But if there's a live webinar, you have to turn up, which means, you've just spent the last 20, 30 minutes learning about ethics and governance. So independence in mind versus appearance. Independence in mind is when you are independent in your head. Independent in appearance is when it appears to be independent. So it looks good from a third-party situation. For example, I have 5 kids, and when I do things with them, if someone's watching me, they say, oh, he's not independent, he loves his kids, so he let them get away with this or that. Now, I might still be independent in my head, but it doesn't look independent. So when we do independence checking, 1, we have to be independent. 2, it has to look independent. So if your wife works as the CEO of a company and you're the auditor, even if you are independent, you might hate your wife. You might try and uncover lots of things that you can ruin her life. But from the outside, it doesn't look independent. So it's got to appear to be independent and also be independent. You should need to find a mentor. At some point, it helps to have a mentor and they can sign off on your work. Close relationship is family. So just use the word family, familiarity, family, how well you are. So I've worked with some people in business for 20 or 30 years. We get on really well, but it's not like family. Family is family, you live and die for them. That's different to, I've got some friends and we work together and do work. So close business relationships, normally self-interest, deep links. If you're going to their weddings, if you are going fishing together and going away for weekends, then you're building a family relationship. If it's just a business relationship, there's still a big threat there, but it's not the same. A client hires you for tax minimization. Yeah, it sucks. Look, what they should be hiring for is the most effective application of the tax laws. So I want to pay the least amount of tax possible that I'm legally required. That's totally fine. If they hire you to cheat on their tax, you know, I really want to cut the corners, be really sneaky, then it's not okay. But tax minimization is, so for example, you can use a trust structures to income split. That's a legitimate approach, because if two people in a family work, then they are income splitting. Now, if one decides to work twice as hard while the other stays at home, they should be allowed to income split in the same way. So I'm happy with that. If you've worked hard and you have genuine expenses, great. But if someone's asking you to claim the 5,000 kilometers and you haven't driven them, not okay. How many descriptive questions will come? No one has any idea. But I think it's only about 12 marks, so it's not going to be too many. Yeah, Alicia, I think you're right with the live webinar. You get to dive a bit deeper and clarify. Can it be slower, please? Yes. One of the things I've done here is I'm hoping you've watched all of Module 1 and Module 2 already, because we're at the end of week 3. So I was kind of like touching on stuff you should have already covered. You should have already seen these webinars where I've talked about the 8 attributes, the 5 principles, the 5 threats. I'm just tying them together. So when we do Module 3, I can go a little bit slower, but I also expect everyone to have, I guess, read Module 3, because I can't teach Module 3 from scratch. That's what the recordings will do. AAA model. Look, I'll be very brief because I'm actually doing another webinar later, but the AAA model is a way of working through an ethical dilemma really systematically. So it starts off, what are the case facts? Who are the key people involved? You know, who are the stakeholders? What are the ethical issues they're wrestling with? So it's normally self-interest versus public interest, you know, making myself rich and wealthy or looking after someone. Then you look through the consequences. Now that's the teleological approach. And then we look at the norms and values, and that's the deontological approach. So it's a bit like saying, well, what does the code of ethics say here? And, you know, what do the fundamental principles say here? And from that, we should be able to work out a simple, so if you look at the PwC example, you've got this fellow and they've sat in, what are the key facts? I've been invited, the government has shared secret tax knowledge with me. What are the issues? I have clients who will benefit from this knowledge, but I would be breaching my confidentiality in the public interest. What are the values and norms? Well, APS 110 says maintain confidentiality and act in the public interest. So what are the consequences? Well, I could help my clients cheat on tax and make lots of money, and I could get caught and fired and lose my job and my total reputation. What's the right thing to do? It's pretty obvious, but that's the AAA model. And the philosophical model just asks 4 questions. And it asks it from what is the ethical egoist perspective, the utilitarian perspective, justice theory perspective, and one other that escapes me. And it just means, have I thought about this ethical issue carefully and thoughtfully? How do you improve your understanding of Module 3 and 4? The first thing, read it really carefully. Read it again and then summarize all of it. So know your director's duties, know the ASX principles, know the FRC code, know, you know, Module 3 and 4 are worth 50%. So if you don't pass that, you can't pass the exam. But with Module 3 and 4, what you've got is trade practices law, consumer protection law, things like that. If you don't know that law, you can't answer the question. So you have to know them very, very well. Procedural justice. What's the procedure? What's the process? I guess it's hard to talk about procedural justice in that sense. Often procedural justice is when you include all the right people in a decision. So if you're in a workplace and you bring the whole team together to work out the plans of the future, that's good procedure. And that's different to distributive justice, who gets the distribution of benefits and burdens. So from this process, you might say it was unfair that she didn't get a say with the doctor, but from a justice perspective, the rights and burdens are fairly distributed if she steals the drugs. She can steal the drugs. The burden on the doctor is very small, but the burden on her if her child dies is very, very high. All right, what's the other webinar for? SMA. So you can come along if you want for strategic management accounting. All right, the best way of attempting the exam, any inputs, we'll talk about that more towards the end of the semester, but do it in the practice exams. start with the multiple choice questions, answer them really quickly, skip the ones you don't know the answer to and come back later. Otherwise, you'll waste a lot of time. I can't tell you when the next live webinar will be. This was just an experiment, but maybe the next couple of weeks. There is no pass mark. Check out our FAQs, check out the blogs that we have to explain the pass mark. But if you can we have a passing table, and it shows you what you get on the practice exam. It tells you your expected score. So if you get average on the practice exam, which is 43, then you're pretty much certain of getting a pass, because the top 70% of people get through. Thank you very much for attending. And if you've got more questions, we'll have another session. Also join the Facebook group, and we can chat more there. Thank you.